Hi guys, this is Ola from Cardbond. In this video, we are going to be bringing together all components of our Xbox Series X controller pad which I've created in the previous videos. It's going to be somewhat like an assembly video or procedure, however it is not completely an assembly in the sense that the joints are not mechanical, but considering the fact that each of the buttons is allowed degrees of freedom in certain ways and they're not really constrained aside with the shell casing of the pad. So we are not going to be using the typical default mechanical constraint style, but this is going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of tweaking till you are satisfied with what you're doing, and it's only this way because we decided to create the components separately and we did not just create them everything together. So without much left to say, we jump into this. To proceed, our first step is going to be to come over to our data panel and remember that we created a buttons folder and we have all of our buttons to be inserted here. We're going to use our canvas to help us in determining where the buttons go, so I'll click on canvas to make it available, and in this case what we need is our top plane. Alright, so what we're going to do is going to be bringing in these buttons A, B, Y and X individually. So I'll click on one by right clicking and select on insert into current design. I would not move it much right now, but actually I'll just leave it this way. I'll leave it at the origin point, insert into current design. Do the same thing for this. Okay, slide down the X. Okay, and lastly our Y, insert into current design. And okay, now there's a slight trick to these buttons. If we look at the shape of the casing properly, we notice that we have curves, which means that the buttons are not necessarily going to be straight all the time. So for the button which is supposed to be, it's going to be tilted a little bit. This is going to be tilted accordingly, and the rest of them. So in a way, it's kind of tricky, but it's still not difficult to do. Our first thing to do is going to be over at the top plane. So what we'll do is I go to the first button, we make the canvas visible again so we know where to place each button. So I go to button A and close this for a moment, move, and I will just drag this using this plane. It makes it faster for me, and drag it over to this spot here. I go to button B, I repeat the same process and do that for the remaining buttons also. Button X, okay, button Y. In the case of, if let's say peradventure we're using a different software, I don't think we'll be able to do it this way. But somehow Fusion 360 was created for weird assembly processes such as this. So with Fusion 360, you don't necessarily have to use very defined assembly processes. That's just the way they created it. So B, I'll try to position them properly. And also we have something we call the as built joint here, which creates a joint, but it just creates it based on, how do I say this, the current position of the object. It's a weird phenomenon, but That's a weird way that this software works. So with all this positioned here, I'm trying to make it constrained in a good way. So what I'll do is I'll select on each of these buttons, move again. So using this top view, I will drag them all upwards till I see that, okay, it's kind of good. I would say let's change the view of this visual style to wireframe. Or I'd say, let me see, wireframe with hidden edges. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to take into account the thickness of the shell. So I'll just drag these buttons downward a little bit. And visual style will go back to normal. Alright, so now that we are this way, this is okay. This is quite not good enough. So for the A, which is okay, we leave it that way, and then the rest of the buttons I will just manipulate and try to place them in a good order. In the case of this white Y button, I'm going to also rotate it to allow it to align properly with the hole, and then position it properly for the rest of it. Alright, so you followed me in a way with what I've just done. You notice that each of the buttons is positioned in its own special way, and that's me taking into consideration the shape of the controller pad case. So for this and some of them, I rotated the way you've seen me demonstrate, and that's the same way that they look in reality. So if I go over to reference image, and you notice that the button is bent in a way, and then they are positioned differently to fit the hole and the shape of the controller pad. So that's also the same procedure that we are following. So we have done all of this. The next thing for us to do would be to bring in some other buttons. So I would say the buttons we created in the previous video, insert into current design. In this case, we would notice that the buttons are positioned already appropriately where they should be, and the reason for this is because when we made these buttons in the previous video, we already placed them where they should be. So we created them as more of like a skeletal modeling approach. So the reference or the main origin point was taken into consideration when we're creating this. Hence, the reference is still taken into consideration now that we're bringing it in. So this is what we have, and I'll bring in the third button also. So to make our adjustments for these buttons, they are simply positioned at a lower altitude. So I would say cancel this for a while, move, and then components 1, 2, and 3. I'll go over to the back view. I'll drag these 3 upwards this way till I feel that it's good enough, generally speaking. And then the next thing for me to do is just to create some extra manipulations for these buttons. So for this one, I'll rotate a bit. Alright, so with these buttons manipulated, the next thing for us to do is going to be to bring in our analog buttons, and back here, so I'll just say joystick. So the joystick we're inserting twice. Insert the first, I'll drag it somewhat this way. Insert the second, I'll drag it this way and take it upwards a little bit. Okay, so using the top view, I'll be able to position them at their appropriate locations. Joystick 1, and just drag till I'm satisfied with where it is. So let's see, this is okay. For joystick 2, do the same and bring it here. Alright, next I would select on both, drag and change the altitude just somewhere about here. The controller pad has most of the analog points or mass below the shell, so this is just about good. So let's see how it looks from this view. Okay, so this is good. However, the holes that we see, I guess we'll move it upwards a little bit more. 1, 2, and then drag up for part of the curve to be outside. Alright. Now this is good. And then we'll bring in these direction buttons. Insert into current design. I'll cancel this. I'll position this in the appropriate space this way. Let's see what we have. Alright, I'll rotate since it should be this way. Alright, in this direction I'll take it upwards. In this direction, and look at it again. Alright, and then lastly, let's see how it looks in the sideways direction and this way. So we notice that it's touching here in a way, so I will drag it downwards a little bit this way and say okay. Alright, so now we have those, and lastly we bring in the final button, the R and L. Insert into current design, and I will drag this outwards this way with the right view. I will bring this backwards somewhat and rotate it because it needs rotation. Rotate it this way, drag downwards, drag inwards. It's a very weird procedure, but I mean, it is satisfactory. So we have this positioned here, and I'll say cancel. Now for all of our parts, we know that we have changed the position. This is to take it back to their initial default positions when they were brought in, but now we say capture position. So we capture position, all of the positions for all of these buttons are saved. I can make our canvas invisible, and this is what we have. So this is our Xbox Series X controller pad. It's I would say a little bit more difficult than I anticipated, and I think that's definitely due to the fact that the buttons were created individually, and perhaps if we had chosen just to create them where or in their position, like after creating the shell, I create the button immediately in that position, create the button, it will look a little bit more different. But the truth is, in reality, the procedure for creating products such as this goes through these difficult kind of situations where the buttons must fit in properly, and it's never really perfect to see. However, for this point here, I think there is definitely no excuse for why this looks this way. But I think it still looks good. So this is this assembly process, and after this we can create the rendered image for everything to make it look good. Alright guys, I know definitely it has been a long journey getting here, but I hope that you've learned one or two things from this project, and your final model also came out similar to this, or even much more better than this. So for now, this would be where we end with the modeling phase, and every other thing is just going to be a fringe display. Alright guys, thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Don't forget to save your project, render it the way you want. I would create my own render also and showcase it to the world. It doesn't matter if it has been the perfect model for you, but the fact that you completed it is something to be proud of. You can tag me on it, so I'll just take a look see and see how far you've gone with this, and hopefully your render is far better than mine. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll catch you later. Hi there, if you liked this video, you can give it a thumbs up by clicking on the like button, and if you are yet to subscribe, it takes you just about 3 seconds to click on the button and select the notification bell so you get updates when new uploads are made. Alright, that's all for now. See you in the next video.